This is the historic city of Ahiska. It dates back to at least the 12th century and is just 20 kilometers from the Turkish border. 75 years ago, it was home to a large population of Ahiska Turks, people also known as Meskhetian Turks, people like Devalidze Majnun Amershaoğlu.
Vatan vatandır.
Your homeland is everything. Some say it's hard to get by here because there are so few jobs, but it's still my homeland. If I hadn't returned, my children would never have come.
During the Second World War, Joseph Stalin saw the Ahiska Turks as a security threat. In 1944, he ordered them to leave. As part of a series of deportations of ethnic minorities in the former Soviet Union, tens of thousands of people were herded onto trains and taken to Central Asia. Many didn't survive the trip. The railway line in Ahiska is still there. For some, the journey would last thousands of kilometers in horrific conditions to unknown locations. Tens of thousands of people were deported on this railway line. They were told they'd be able to return after a few weeks or a few months, but they weren't allowed. Thousands of them died as a result of starvation and disease while making the journey, and most of the others had to spend the rest of their lives in what were effectively foreign countries. Balabek Merdan is a 79-year-old Ahiska Turk who now lives in Istanbul. He was 3 years old when his family was forced to leave their home in Georgia. He remembers when the army came to round everyone up for the trains, a journey that's left its mark.
Götürdüler şimdi. Yol şeysine gidiyor.
Soldiers came during morning prayers and told us to leave. They didn't say where we were going, just that we had to drop everything and leave. My father was just back from the army. He was disabled, his arm, and they were deporting us. They piled us into carriages, 15 to 20 families at a time. Every now and then they would give us water, but there were no toilets. Men would scream so the soldiers couldn't hear the women giving birth. People were hiding their dead from the soldiers, saying they were asleep because if the soldiers realized, they would throw the bodies off the train. Our relatives told us many stories of this person or that one who was thrown from the train. Humans, they threw humans off the train. And these people have lived through this.
According to the World Union of Ahiska Turks, there are about 600,000 Ahiska Turks living in 9 countries around the world. The biggest group is in Kazakhstan in Central Asia. 110,000 live in Russia and 17,000 in the United States. Only 2,500 Ahiska Turks remain in Georgia. It's 20 years since Georgia joined the Council of Europe, an international organisation that aims to uphold human rights and the rule of law. As a result, it introduced a repatriation law in 2007 to enable what the government refers to as deported or Muslim Meskhetians to come back, the last of the people forced out by Stalin, allowed to return to their homeland.
Taking that commitment towards Council of Europe was not only having a commitment, and it was also our will of restoration of historical justice. So we realized and we knew that we wanted that persons to let that persons come back and live here.
But the results have been slow. So far, there have been only about 5,500 applications to return. Almost 2,000 have been approved and granted repatriation status, but only 494 have applied for full citizenship, the last of which was in 2016, under what has proved for some to be a difficult procedure. Retired schoolteacher Devalidze Amershaoğlu returned to live in Georgia 2 years ago and bought a house in Ahiska after what turned out to be a nomadic life. Both his parents were expelled by Stalin, but his father fought in the Soviet army during the Second World War and was only deported when his service had finished.
They took my father when he was 16. My uncle was 14 to the Soviet army. How can someone who serves in the army be an enemy? My father was serving the Soviet Union. when they put people on the train to Central Asia and said they'd be back in a week. But when my father and the others returned from the army, there was no one in the villages.
Devalidze was born and brought up in Uzbekistan, where his family settled. But they moved again when violence broke out against Ahiska Turks in the Fergana Valley in 1989. Balabek was living in Uzbekistan at the same time. He and his family also fled, this time to Azerbaijan.
Konteynere yükledik.
When we were loading our luggage, they asked what destination to put. I said, I don't know. I don't know the address. So I asked what the most common destination was. She said Azerbaijan, so I told her to write Azerbaijan. She started crying, looking at me, an old man who has no idea where he is going.
Devalidze returned to Georgia as it was gaining independence from the Soviet Union in the early 1990s. A coup took place and the country descended into civil war. Devalidze managed to stay for just over a year, as these documents show, before he was deported. His family stayed in Azerbaijan until they finally returned to Georgia a few years ago, but Devalidze still hasn't got a Georgian passport.
İndi de seri kopyası vardır. Bende o pasportun, Sovyet pasportunun.
I have a copy of my Soviet passport. It says I'm Georgian. So why are we not able to get citizenship? That's what everyone wants to know. In the archives, there are records that prove that we are citizens. Even if we don't have the papers anymore, it's all there in the archives. They can check. After the Soviet Union collapsed, our passports were cancelled. As we were living in Azerbaijan, we had to give them up and get new passports. There was a law stating that the person must become a citizen of the country in which he or she lives. We didn't have any other option.
The majority of Ahiska Turks who've come to Georgia since the repatriation law was introduced have come from Azerbaijan. Once repatriation status is granted, people have 5 years to apply for full citizenship. But obtaining the official documents from Azerbaijan can be time-consuming and cost several $100s, which many people don't have. As neither country recognises dual citizenship, when applicants become Georgian citizens, they have to give up their Azerbaijani passport. Georgia says they need help from Azerbaijan and other countries to make the process easier. The World Union of Ahiska Turks protects the rights of people like Devalidze. It has representatives in 9 countries, and in Georgia helps newcomers settle in. The association's representative there backs the repatriation law, but believes it can be improved.
We need a rehabilitation law, not repatriation. They should adopt a rehabilitation law, but they don't think to do that, because a rehabilitation law means the return of assets, compensation, payment for health problems, and transportation. All of that is a package paid for by the state. A repatriation law is just a return statute. It's not enough.
The most common theories about Ahiska Turks is that they date back to Ottoman times, either Turks who settled in the area or locals who converted to Islam. In 1639, an international treaty left the Ottoman Empire largely in control of what is modern-day Georgia. And since a law change in the 1990s, about 80,000 Ahiska Turks have come to live in Turkey. Balabek Merden took advantage of the regulations and moved to Istanbul. He helped rebuild this mosque after the 1999 earthquake and prays here regularly.
Ata baba toprağı Türkiye. İşte 96'da.
We came here in 1996 to our homeland, Turkey. In other countries, you need to watch out for yourself, be on your guard. But here you don't need to. Everyone speaks Turkish. Doctors and police understand you. You say salam alaikum as you walk past. What does our greeting mean? No harm will come to you from me. May the peace, mercy and blessings of Allah be upon you. Is there any need to watch out after hearing this?
Şimdi Türkiye'desin.
For Devalidze, it's not too late for Ahiska Turks to return to Georgia. Despite bureaucratic challenges, he still recommends it. Anyone given repatriation status can stay indefinitely and has access to services.
Gerek bugün gelsin gelen insan.
People who want to return should come now, because in the future their children won't come. They won't be interested because they don't know or love the land. Our parents told us how beautiful it is, so we came.
Ahiska Turks aren't returning to Georgia in their droves, but at least now there's an official system in place so they can finally go home if they want, after decades of being on the move. Andrew Hopkins for Straight Talk in Georgia.